Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in occupational therapy.
Okay. So I went to Western up in Bellingham and I was studying psychology. And when I was up there, I had a part-time job through DSHS doing respite care. And so I was working with a kiddo who had autism and ended up taking him to some of his occupational therapy appointments. And so that was some of my first like glimpses into, OT and what it might look like. That also got me really interested in just learning more about autism and different kinds of disabilities, and especially working with, kids with disabilities. So that was kind of what started me on the path. But then it wasn't until like many years later that I ended up going to graduate school finally for occupational therapy. Um, and yeah, I guess that kind of led me to Boyer Children's Clinic where I work today.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So like what kinds of things do you work on as an OT? What sorts of things do you focus on?
So OT is super general. I know some people haven't heard of it. And so overall, like occupational therapists work on like activities of daily living, as we call it. So like sleeping, dressing, eating, going to the bathroom, and then also motor skills, so fine motor, but also, gross motor skills too, using your hands to do things, use tools, stuff like that. So for the age group I work with at Boyer, it's birth to 3-year-olds, or early intervention, early support services. And so, OTs we're working on everything I just described, but really it's all in the context of play and those kind of the family's daily routines. Um, so, I might have goals around like coloring or stacking blocks, fine motor stuff, or sleeping. We would do a lot of feeding, addressing like feeding concerns and just helping kids get more independent with like getting dressed or using the bathroom. And I also, we also address like sensory processing differences, which is really tied to behavior and emotional regulation. So I end up spending a lot of time on that as well, because that's really connected to everything else. If you're a dysregulated kiddo, then it's hard to really work on anything else till we address that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Cool. Cool stuff. Um, what sorts of things do you look for when like working with a patient w with a disability? How do you like what sorts of things do you do to like make sure that that person is independent and can do tasks on their own? Like what do you like do to what sorts of things do you look at is what I'm trying to say. I know I'm rambling, but
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, the OT services in this setting are so family centered that really, we always start by just kind of asking their parents, what's feeling important to work on, what routines are hard, or kind of just what goals they have for their child, in the next several months, because things also change so quickly at that age that sometimes goals or what we're working on changes every few months. But yeah, we definitely have a big focus on like at this, if you have ever met a 2 or 3-year-old, you know that like autonomy is so important. And so, that is a big part of what we do, is trying to figure out how can we give this child a sense of control and give them as much autonomy as possible. So things like following their lead when we play, like I'm not going to go in there being like, we're stacking blocks today or else, I'll just
Mhm.
kind of see what they're interested in and then try to maybe like gently shape that into working on certain things. But um, that tends to really help build like our relationships too as therapists. And if we have a good relationship, then maybe, you know, things it'll be easier to kind of get them to do certain activities that I want to try. Um, and that shows up a lot with those daily routines too, like feeding, dressing, that just finding ways to help them be more independent with those things can just make everything feel more successful.
Mm-hmm. Who are like the key players in like making sure that and a person with a disability, like child with a disability, you know, is more independent? Is it the parents? Is it what sorts of people are involved in making sure that that happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, of course, their parents or caregivers are often kind of the primary person. Um, and we often work with other caregivers too, though. Like we'll work with their teachers at daycare or preschool if they're in some kind of preschool. We'll work with grandparents if grandparents are involved in their care. We also work with kids involved in the child welfare system. So it might be like a foster parent or kinship, relative that's caring for them. Um, their doctor, some kids who have medical complexities will collaborate too with like their doctor to figure out how to problem solve certain things together to help them kind of be their best and grow and develop. Um, so yeah, I guess those are the key players, but of course the child is also kind of the key player, but especially for young kids, it's really all about their relationships they have in their life that will help them kind of get more independent.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, how can occupational therapy help a patient live the best quality of life? How can it make a difference, basically?
Mm-hmm. Um, I I mean, obviously I'm a little biased. I love OT. I think that there's so much potential for addressing like more holistic things, like just helping kids really and adults too just participate in meaningful ways in their lives and their daily routines and kind of do what they want to do. Um, so I mean, I love how our goals are often about both the parent and the child, and so really we're often indirectly impacting the parent too. Like if that kiddo is eating better and independent with feeding, that might make meal times less stressful for the whole family, for example. So yeah, there's a lot we can do. I mean, OT is all about just helping, helping people participate in their meaningful occupations, aka like their daily activities and whatever's important to them. So I love to just shift the lens and kind of keep the focus on whatever might be the biggest priority for that kiddo and family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think that's a really important points there.